Hi there. Welcome to the Carr Brothers Show. It's episode 142. I'm Jack.
And I'm Jeff.
And I'm Jody, and really happy that everyone is joining us tonight. What a great day it is with the sunshine, and we started a new month. We're into May.
We're into May, guys. We're finally, hopefully, getting some nicer weather here, and which, you know, with all of us connected to real estate, Joe as a real estate lawyer,
Yes.
primarily, and then Jeff and I with as realtors, when the weather gets nicer, it really creates a whole lot of
just one sec. I want some of my Jack Carr real estate water, please.
Exactly.
Thank you.
But that's what they tell me with my limited experience. Watch out for when the sun comes out and the grass gets green, that people get motivated to start moving properties or look at properties.
Yeah.
And so I've seen it happen.
Yes.
Well, I was talking to someone today, and they said, my phone's just off the hook. It was landscaping. My phone's just off the hook. It must have been because they were worried about the election. And I'm like, I don't know if people were worried about the election or they're just happy now it's done, and they have thought about that a lot, and now they can get on to some of their own personal lives and do some stuff like that they've been looking at doing, you know.
And the weather was a big part.
Weather would be a big part, but isn't it great? The election is behind us, and we'll talk about that election.
Yeah.
We'll talk about some of the results. We'll talk about what people are saying, and we want to hear what people have to say about this on their comments. If you're on Facebook, comment in.
Yeah.
And let us know what you're thinking. Happy, sad, surprised, not surprised.
Indifferent.
Yeah. Does the world
Happy it's behind us.
The world keeps moving
I
forward.
think most people are happy it's behind us.
I think
we can
so.
move on, and social media isn't just all engulfed with everybody's points of view and opinions and how can you vote this way or that way. It is what it is. People vote how they want. Most people figure out how they vote. They're paying attention, and it's over.
Yeah,
behind us.
Exactly. And I think most people will say, look, don't mind people putting their opinions and sharing, but of course, a lot of people do not like to be told how they should and why they shouldn't and why you going with this. Everyone has their own reasons that we've experienced over all these years, and you have to just let them have their opinion and respect that. And it's pretty hard to, when someone's dug right deep, pretty hard to change their opinion.
Yeah.
In fact, almost impossible.
It is.
Yeah, to go on social media and try to convince people of things that are
Well,
complex and personal. It's really hard.
Yeah. And I mean, the social media or algorithms, I mean, you're talking to your friends list. So the majority of the people on your friends list, not all, but
And-
they're like-minded or not. And so you're talking to those guys.
And some of them are not their friends anymore.
That's
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
I
I
know.
think there's been
That's
some
the sad
people
part.
There has
that
been
had
some blocks and unfriends and snoozes. I saw one person wrote that they're glad that they snoozed their account or snooze, I guess. I don't know what
Paused
you call
it
it.
or whatever
Pause
you
it
call it.
for
Their
30
followers,
days.
yeah.
Just glad, and they didn't have to see any of it. So there you have it. It's over.
Well, what about you guys?
Another
What do
minority.
you think? What do you think?
We'll do a little recap of the
Okay.
results. So
Let's do a little
the
recap.
Liberal Party, Mark Carney, formed a minority government, 169 seats, short by 3 seats. I believe it was 172 to have a majority. And the Conservative Party had 144 seats. NDP, a dismal 7. The Bloc had 22, and the Green Party with 1. Their lone champion all these years, Elizabeth May, they have 1 seat, and she was reelected. So, and then when you look at the voter percentage, 43.7% for the Liberals versus 41.3% for the Conservatives. So that's a difference of 2 percentage points difference, and. So very
usually
close, very close.
41's a really good popular vote number to win an election.
Yeah.
But
And
there was very little vote split.
Yeah.
still very polarized. You know, it's fairly even in terms, not seat count, but
divided.
popular vote is
Yeah.
fairly divided. Strong-willed on both sides. The day after, there were quite a lot of upset people. Maybe still are
With the results. Yeah.
some of the people that were expecting a different result.
Yeah, that didn't believe the polls and stuff like that, I guess.
Well,
so.
like I know conservatives were upset, that how could this happen? And people are, and then when you get personal attacks of people that voted in the electorate, but I think that's some of it's natural. It's like, well, they're going to vote what they get, and they're going to, in 2 weeks, don't start complaining. This is what you voted for. But I think the same would have happened the other way around.
It's normal. It happens. People will work it through their systems as time goes on.
I have to say, you've heard me say this before, and I'll say it again. I'm not surprised about the NDP.
No.
And I'm glad Jake Ming Singh did the right thing and announced his resignation.
Yeah.
But to go to, as Jack said, a dismal 7 seats,
Yeah.
they were the biggest disappointment of the whole
They
4
were.
years campaign, whenever the last election was. They kept propping up Trudeau and then tried to make it look like they were
Tough.
They were tougher and defending people, and they weren't. And he was weak, and the results showed.
Yeah, and the ballot question, he had no way to work that ballot question in his favor as far as
wasn't even on
standing
the
up
ball
to Trump and tariffs and all that stuff. Like he doesn't have a horse in the race on it. So I guess people just decided they were going to vote for Carney or Poilievre, and that's what they did.
Yep.
They've missed being official party status. I think 12 is the number.
People ask, what does that mean?
Yeah.
So what do you guys know that means?
Well, my limited experience in politics tells me that if you have official party status, you get more funding for staff and researchers. You would have more opportunity to speak in the House of Commons. And the House of Commons is a different legislature. It's a lottery system for bills and for opposition members and speaking time and stuff like that. So I think it gives you more of an advantage if you're official party status in that process and whatnot, I think.
And probably probably on committees
work,
as
members
well.
on the
Things
committees,
rolling
yeah.
down on committee
But
work.
funding is the big one, I think,
Yeah.
for staffers and researchers and things like that.
In
So
Parliament.
if you lose that, it's hard to get back.
Hard to get your message, hard to get your staff, and so that'll have a big impact on them. But again, if they're
Did
irrelevant,
I cover that pretty
yeah, I
good?
think
think
so.
so.
That's what I've told people. It
think
really
so.
doesn't change them as a party itself. The party still stays as a party. It is a party. The party doesn't get eliminated, but their resources would be cut significantly.
Because there has to be a reward for getting X amount of seats to get party status. There has to be a reward. You can't just flounder around like
Well, now
Elizabeth May and
and
the other guy there from the PPC and think you're going to get everything. And how many parties are there? I mean, there's only 4 or 5 parties with seats, but you have to make some kind of a cutoff and make a reward. If you're going to work and if you're going to appeal to the people and you're going to get X amount of seats, you should be rewarded for it party-wise. So that's how I see it.
what else?
Well, go ahead.
Well, let's break it down some. On,
Okay.
we talked a little bit about the NDP. I think we all agree with that was a dismal failure, but no surprise. And then because Jeff, you mentioned earlier about lack of vote splitting, so then you come back to the sort of traditional 2-party horse race, and that's those votes. I don't know what the distribution would have been, but. Because the PC Conservatives, I think, picked up some of that. Like they had a lot of private union support across the country, more than I think in past.
Well, and the pundits and the people that should know automatically assumed or thought most of that NDP vote would swing to Carney and put him up in the majority. But whether it was last-minute decisions by people voting that hadn't voted yet, or was, like you say, the union work, I think that movement of votes kind of split between Carney and Poilievre.
Right.
In different areas, and that would allow the Conservatives to get as many seats as they did because the numbers were showing that they were going to finish lower than that.
They did better in Ontario than what the polls predicted, especially outside of Toronto.
Yeah.
And getting 144 seats. Now let's do a little dissect there on the Conservative Party. They were riding very high in the polls up to January, and then lo and behold, Trudeau announces his departure. And then the Trump factor with tariffs, and that turned everything right around for the Conservatives in a bad way.
And Poilievre wasn't prepared to pivot.
No.
To defend Canada, to answer to the ballot question. Or he stuck to his ballot question, which the public... But then again, you look at the results, and maybe, they did obviously resonate with a lot of people.
Right, for
and
change.
also, no matter what Carney did, there's too much damage that Trudeau... Like, he couldn't carry it completely. But it is basically an amazing story of Carney, who comes out from left field, good reputation in the private sector, or not private, but in the government and private sector. But then Poilievre was, in a way, the biggest loser next to the NDP in terms of he was riding high in the polls. And I think that, you hear the stories about the arrogance and kind of some... taken for granted a little bit.
Obviously, 41% of the popular vote Didn't mind it.
Well, there's still also, that's what it shows. There's still a division and a polarized effect. Hopefully the Conservatives will say, okay, we got to put the benefit of our country first. But in a minority situation, we don't need games in terms of bringing down the government. And that's been Poilievre's message for the last 2 years, is to bring the government down. And rightly so. Trudeau was terrible. Personally, my opinion.
Yes.
I mean, he was terrible, asleep at the switch. The reason we got into these problems was because he just wasn't dealing with the issues and wasn't capable of dealing with them. But who would have expected that that could be turned around?
Well,
and it was.
Those numbers leading up to January with Poilievre and the Conservatives being so far ahead, obviously there was some Liberal people going there to get rid of Trudeau. They were going in that direction. They wanted to get rid of him.
And several
Carney
incumbents
comes along and, we're going to try to preserve our party again, so they come back to Carney.
Several incumbents decided they weren't going to reoffer, Liberal incumbents, and then switch of the leadership. And then a few of them, especially the big heavy hitter, Sean Fraser was one of them. Christy Freeland had announced her resignation. She, came back, ran for the leadership, things like that. That was the sort of message.
Wayne Long,
Wayne Long,
and
that
they
was
won
needed.
fairly decent.
They did.
And
They're fighters.
Yeah.
People like a fighter.
Oh yeah, especially in St.
And they
John.
want you out speaking publicly and on all the radio stations and doing the interviews and stuff like that. That's what they want. If they can hear you talking on their side, fine. But if you're not going to do the interviews like some of our candidates did, and you're going to shy away from that stuff,
what are you going to be when
opportunities.
and what are you going to be when you're in government if you're not accessible and answering to the public? So
so we'll get that in a second as well. And actually, right now, because that still ties into Poilievre, and a lot of people have mentioned, very Trumpy. Well, the anti-media, as you mentioned, no media on their plane traveling with the campaign, and also the anti-journalism, the anti-journalists, and that was too much like Trump, and I think for a lot of people, and anti-CPC, which is again an anti-media sort of anti-Trump flavor. So a lot of people had said, but that's what they were a bit concerned about voting for Poilievre.
Well, it just gave them people the opportunity to put them both in the same basket, basically.
It's still funny though, Rez.
It's hard to get away from it once you're painted with it. It's tough.
But there's obviously an awful lot of people that do feel that way.
Right.
That it did resonate, as you said, like that they think everything's just silly and people are tiptoeing around everybody and they're not taking real action. And a growing segment, obviously a significant segment of the population, wants to kind of this strength of the fittest, I guess. And I think the Conservatives currently have this brand where they have to be tough and they have to be mean and they have to be getting to the bottom of all this. And I just still don't believe you have to be mean to get government done. But
lesson learned.
So then the caucus. So what's Poilievre's future? He didn't win in his riding. Now it's interesting. They're saying, well, look at all of these candidates that were in his riding, but I'd like to see what the independent.
I did look
at the results.
It was a big long ballot, but that didn't have any.
They didn't get any votes. Those independents.
Well, they got 850, close to 900 votes.
They did.
So I did
the math?
I did do the math.
Good.
Okay, tell us
and
about it.
So there wasn't enough to. So the Liberal
just
candidate,
for a little context for anybody that hasn't seen it on social media. There was in Pierre Poilievre's riding, and I'm probably sure there was other ridings.
No,
it was it, eh?
Yeah.
If people, so this is a protest against Poilievre and first past the post as well, I'm sure. And anybody can get their name on the ballot if they get X amount of signatures on their nomination papers and pay a deposit type of thing. I think it's 100 names. So the intent there was to bog down Poilievre, and 90-some people got their name on the ballot in Carleton, which is Poilievre's riding. And some of the conspiracy theorists out there said that because there were so many names on the ballot, it was confusing for the voters. The Liberal candidate's name, I can't think of it now, but anyway.
Bruce Fanjoy.
His name was down in the ballot, buried down in there as well, like Poilievre's was on one side. So is it a nuisance? Yes, it is a nuisance. Who the biggest nuisance is for is the people that have to count those ballots. That's who the nuisance is for, because they have to go through thousands and thousands and thousands of those, and they have to check every person's name to see if there's a dot beside it. So that's the context on why those ballots were so big and long.
But then there were different theories before the election. The theory is that, well, I forget how many of the independents have the same official agent. So it was coordinated.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh,
for
sure. It was coordinated. There was a coordinated effort.
There's a coordinated group that did this. I can't remember the name of the organization, but there was a
coordinated group,
Yeah.
and there was some thought that it was those that were against Polyev, so that their votes would be split and siphoned off of his. I don't know.
And resources, if that means if you get 90 people, there are 90 people that aren't working on campaigns.
Well,
particularly
each of their families and each of their networks are voting against for them that would not otherwise maybe. But then anyway, maybe it was a liberal conspiracy, because now, after Polyev has lost, there's a lot of conservatives sharing that ballot, saying that look at this, this is why Polyev lost. But that was good. I wanted to know how that affected, though. With those votes, it wouldn't have still given them enough.
So the number was 7?
Well, I don't have the exact percentages,
but it was
here
under
now.
1,000.
I did it a couple days ago. But so Bruce Vanjoy got the majority vote,
Right.
so it was over 50%. And then when you add it up, you take off the traditional parties, NDP, Green, even the People's Party and things like that. And then the 80-some independents received, it was around 900 votes.
And that's assuming
then you added up the other ones, it was under the 4,000 gap that Vanjoy beat Polyev. So.
Yeah, and that's assuming that all of those independents would go to Polyev.
Well,
so
exactly.
if they all went to Polyev, he was still short.
Yes.
But who I feel bad for in that riding is Jack Dupont. Jack Dupont had 0 votes.
Okay.
Oh.
Didn't even vote for themselves.
Didn't even vote for themselves. There was one independent that got 1 vote. So I'm assuming he voted for himself. But anyways, that's just being facetious.
Well, we've all had our name on a ballot. It would suck to have zero votes.
I don't know. Maybe. Who knows? Maybe he forgot it was election
But it
day.
has happened in other by-elections for protests. Not in this election, maybe.
But 90 candidates like this?
Yeah, I read in
80 something?
I read in the
Really?
paper.
Yeah.
I thought that was only done in America.
I read in the paper, I don't know, it was Adam Harris's story, it was Telegraph, something like that. And you're right, Jeff, it did happen in where it was actually in favor of the conservative candidate won.
Yep.
And they had other 90-some other
I
candidates.
think it might have been in a by-election over the last couple of years.
It was definitely orchestrated because of that official agent being the same official agent.
Question.
So what bothers me about that, whoever did it, it's just abusing kind of,
and
trying to manipulate the results.
And there are people calling for Elections Canada to find a way to limit that from happening,
I suppose,
which is difficult.
Increase
the number of the number of names you need. But that punishes everybody.
Well, I just don't know otherwise how you do it.
I don't either.
Unless you're
you can't exclude a person in the Democratic process.
No,
to meet all
because there have been independents that have run independent
all the time
to get it and got elected.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyways,
so
Jeff,
we are
ready for
at the end of this segment, right, guys? We've been on for a fair bit of time. It's been an exciting conversation. We're going to dive more into the past election, break it down by riding, talk about different candidates, their philosophies, and how they did or didn't do well in this election. So stay tuned for a few public service announcements from CHCO, and then come right back to see us.
Hi there, welcome back to the Carr Brothers Show, episode 142. I'm Jack.
And I'm Jeff.
And I'm Jody. Welcome back to the Carr Brothers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we've been chatting about the federal election. Well, let's keep diving in there. We talked about the election results, a minority liberal government with 169 seats, not that far off from a majority. Like 3 seats, I think, is 172. Take away the speaker, then you're still at, three seats, 4 seats that are needed.
4 at the most, because it's all going to depend on who goes for speaker and who they want. Like who the liberals, if you know.
Yeah, there's always that whole segment.
I think that it shouldn't be a problem to get 3 members of parliament to support the liberals. I don't think they have to necessarily go into the block. I think with Jagmeet Singh now, NDP leaderless.
So there's 7 there.
Out of those 7, maybe the Greens.
Yeah,
I mean, and it won't be the same as propping up the. It won't be the same as the party. You don't need the whole party as a block.
Yeah, you don't need as many seats as well.
So will Carney's job now, or his people, be to get 3 members of parliament either to cross over to them, or at least agree to some sort of something?
Right.
So it's possible that you wouldn't be surprised if they're working on that right now.
Oh, they'd have to be working on that.
And then to have a clear majority. The majority is good for our stability of us working with the United States and not getting into this. You're going to fall. The election's going to call an election, and all this instability and uncertainty. But
yeah, it wouldn't be difficult for a member of one of those parties to justify keeping the government going short term. Really wouldn't, because those arguments right there, and like you say, it's not like propping up Trudeau. So I don't see another election for over a year away. I don't. But hey, you never know. Cardy might just.
Well, certainly it puts the Carney to the test now. You got the election out of the way, emotions are reduced, and then now it's okay. Let's see how it's really Carney's now.
How is he going to perform
on the spotlight? So, I guess his post-election speech talked about working together. I think those are all key things to say. What he needs to say, which is working together, especially if it's the message to the other parties, like you said, Jody, even some of those 7 or 8 other seats, reach out to them. But then also Poilievre, his speech was not as Trumpy. It was, respect the results. And didn't go down that road of, it's been rigged and the pencil and the pen issue.
Judicial reviews and all this.
Yeah. Now he's making calls, of course, because he's
got to keep his
lost a seat. You got to reach out to all his 144 elected members because they decide. They decide the leader of the opposition, I suppose, is what they decide.
In the
That's
Parliament.
the next step that will take place.
Yeah,
will it be?
I suppose they'll have to decide if they're going to stay with Poilievre. He's still the leader of the party.
Right, so they don't have a decision in that, the caucus, but they have a caucus decision.
There would be a decision with caucus, and I suppose in conjunction with him, of who becomes their House leader, or in the House leader, I guess, and caucus chair and all that stuff.
Leader of the official opposition.
Right.
And
or do they do it on their own and leave him out? I don't see that. I think that they would still work with Pierre Poilievre to make those decisions, but somebody's going to have to be in charge inside the House.
Right. And so he's making his phone calls. Because, and you mentioned Jode as well, the Liberals only need 3-4 seats. So it wouldn't be unexpected that the Carney is calling even some of the progressive side of the Conservative Party.
Could very well.
To see if any of those members.
There's lots of conversations going on back and forth.
So it's still not a shortage of drama, I think, yet.
Before we went into minority in 2018, we were still in opposition until Brian Gallant lost his throne speech vote.
Right.
And some of those Liberal caucus members were calling our members, trying to get them to flip over. They were calling 1 or 2, and one of the People's Alliance trying to get them to flip to the Liberals so they could stay in power back then. So it's happening. It's going on. Yeah. Lots of promises being made. Lots of bullying. It's and they would have to break with that many people to call. You'd have to break it down some way regional.
It's a lot of people
work
to call
on them. So it would be a very busy time inside the halls of the House of Commons right now in Parliament Hill. That's for sure. I would almost be turning my phone off because I wouldn't want anybody nagging at me to move from one way to the other. But I think
we also know it's interesting the impact that it has on the riding, though, right? So I mean, this one can just switch that. Well, we know when that happens, there's some really upset people. Like, I didn't vote for you as a conservative or you as a liberal. I voted for you as a this or as a that, as a Green Party member, and.
Well, you're pretty well right in your end of your career if you do. I think if you flip, I mean, the numbers show that you can't win if you cross the floor. It has happened. I mean, Jenica pulled it off.
Bill Casey in Nova Scotia a couple of times.
Yeah, so it can happen. In our case,
Bob McCready. But that was a long time ago.
That was a long
time. But generally, it's
he had a great portfolio to feed the people, though, too.
Generally, you're out. You're out if you cross the floor and try to seek re-election.
In our case, in 2018. The candidate did not cross the floor, but in the next election, that riding went red. They're probably the biggest number of Liberal votes in one riding I've ever seen. They were so upset with Higgs at that time in 2020. So he could have switched and stayed in that riding and won again, but he didn't even stay in that riding. He went to another one and won. So. It's it's a risk, but it's going on. It has to be happening, and they're calling all the other fringe parties looking for support, I'm sure. But I shouldn't say fringe, but just the smaller number seat parties.
Getting there.
Yeah, so it's probably exciting times up there. But and do we know? Did they even say when they're coming back in the House? I don't think they set a date.
I was wondering myself.
Hasn't it been set? Isn't it?
Oh, sometime in May,
until
near the end of May.
Well, I think it was May.
Yes,
something like that.
there's our
Our
director,
director's
Terry
saying,
Galland.
May
We
the
thanks
7th,
very much.
26th.
Yes, and someday we'll give him a microphone.
And that
Yeah.
date was probably already prescribed when they prorogued.
Right. I believe so. Yeah. Because remember, it was all
26th of
about
May.
the budget and then.
Well, then that's exciting, guys, because now
Less
in the
than a
next
month.
so many weeks, they got to get this sorted, and if they have a budget,
Well,
then
he's gotta-
So that's where, like Polyev, it's not doomsday for the conservative per se. They get that sorted out, whether he's staying on as a leader or not. Then there's still a lot that can happen between even now and the fall with how Carney manages. It's really Carney's now to manage this. Like you said, Jody, you got a small, a very close majority, but small enough where it's a minority. Got to keep this side happy, that side happy. Got to keep your own people happy. There's a cabinet that's got to be selected. Nothing to say that there's disgruntled Liberals and they move over some results. So there's jockeying there, and then it's really Carney's how he handles Trump, how he handles a lot of things. Now that he's got the reign, And
Exactly.
So it's not the Conservatives have out of the wilderness. They have a healthy number of 144, and then just see how the next few months go. It's not easy for incumbent governments as well. So,
what was interesting in Polyev's riding as well, I saw the numbers. There was like 81% voter turnout.
yeah,
Wow.
that's
That's
high.
significant. And the voter turnout overall across Canada hadn't been higher since 2015. So it wasn't like
Wasn't the
like
highest
it
ever.
wasn't off the chart by any means. But when I saw 81% of voter turnout, and here in Fredericton, in the city riding, Fredericton, Ormocto, New Maryland, David Miles won handedly,
Yes.
almost double the votes to Brian McDonald, the Conservative. David Miles just kind of joined the race. I think even after the election was called, he became the candidate officially and was appointed.
Yeah.
But very well known. Well known with his music, but also his family well known in the community, arts community, and whatnot around. But David Miles had 30,685 votes, and Brian McDonald had 16,174. So almost doubled. The Green Party was a dismal 1,500 votes. Very, very not. I'm going to sound like I'm picking on them, but I expect more from them in the Fredericton riding, knowing that
Considering they held the seat at one time.
the leader of they held the seat, and the leader of the Green Party provincially is in this riding, and they mustered up 1,571 votes. The NDP did worse, and then down from there.
So a lot of the green vote went to David Miles,
Yeah,
obviously.
Yeah.
Had to have. So is there a percentage of turnout?
yeah. The turnout was 75%.
Ooh, that's a good number.
And that doesn't include those that put their name forward on election day. The voters that signed up on election day.
Voted on election day.
Yep, so that'll be tallied.
Well,
but still.
the candidates did a good job getting the vote out then, getting people motivated to get out in Fredericton. That's quite something.
Well, I was amazed driving through the riding and then in around Fredericton, the city, seeing how many David Miles signs were on lawns, side lawns and what. And I noticed as well, though, Brian McDonald had quite a few in Ormocto and quite a few in Lincoln, especially. Lincoln, Tamarack. And where were the votes? So I believe on Elections Canada website, they'll show the poll by poll in the whole riding. So I haven't gone in to check that out, but apparently you can see the map. So we'll have to look at that.
Yeah. Well,
So, I mean, there you go. We'll probably expect David Miles to have a song or two in the Parliament.
right.
So it's kind
Does
of
he get a shot at cabinet? With Dominic and Jeanette Pettipaw-Taylor there? Probably
it'll be
not,
tough.
eh?
Kinda
Maybe
hard.
junior minister?
maybe
tough,
a
but,
parliamentary secretary of some sort.
right.
But
for
Parliamentary secretary.
brand new MP and that big of a gap in votes, like doing that great of a vote, I think the Prime Minister would just take that sort of for granted and not make him into cabinet. He wouldn't. I don't think he
Well,
will.
it's pretty hard to take Jeanette out.
Yes.
oh yeah,
And she had a pretty resounding win as well, and she's held it for 3 elections in a row now, maybe 4, since 2015. So, and Dominic LeBlanc, he's not coming out of cabinet.
No.
He's probably he would be the main advisor there for Prime Minister.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and let's take a look at
he
Wayne
was
Long.
smiling pretty good when the numbers changed. I know that.
So Wayne Long's riding
Yeah.
in St. John, which is also, I mean, I was a bit surprised, but in another way I wasn't. But Wayne Long won handedly at 26,129 votes, and Melissa Young, the Conservative, was 16,787. So a large gap, but Wayne Long has been a fighter for St. John since he got elected, and St. John's known for supporting candidates that have shown to stand up for them, like Elizabeth Weir, Elsie Wayne, you know, so he's
a great communicator too.
Yeah.
Like he's not shy and he's quick to spin his message.
Yeah, doesn't let it drag on though for
no.
3, 4, 5 days. He's right on there.
He's right on it. And you're right, Jody. The fighter part. I mean, his record has shown he was kicked off all the committees he was on because he stood up for what he believed was right, and that was pipelines. And there was some tax bills that went through, and he's like, "No, this is wrong," and he paid for it. And he's being rewarded for it now.
And interesting, too, because it came out in the story before the election that St. John would be the hardest hit city in Canada for tariffs and the Trump factor. So interesting to know whether, you know, what that played in. They wanted to fight her.
He messaged it.
Yeah. And he had been on it from early, right?
Yeah. And Melissa Young, let's give her credit.
My gosh, yes.
You know,
she got some union votes.
Was
What'd she get
appointed.
for votes there, Joe? What did she get for votes?
Was appointed
16,000.
the week before the election or during. And of course, the two other candidates that wanted to run, and there's some obviously some people being upset in the party. The president, she stepped down, and then back to Melissa. I think she ran a good campaign of just being appointed a week or during that election.
Well, she's been campaigning for a little while.
Yeah, a little bit.
Can't
But
nominee.
But you're up against a strong incumbent that fights for the city, and you're up against potentially the Trump factor. It's a city.
Yes.
I'm not sure the result would have been any different. Maybe it would have been, because Lisa Keenan, solid in St. John too, has been there for a long time, well known.
Yeah, that's 10,000. That was 10,000 votes. So I'm not sure if
That's a lot.
It would have been
I don't
enough
think
to-
it would have.
I don't think so.
No, if they would have held a proper nomination,
No.
is what I'm getting at.
But
especially with the
those
nomination
two
the week
ladies-
before.
But why
Even
did
if the
they?
nomination
Why
was
did
the
they
week
wait
before,
for so
it's
long?
tough.
Why did they wait so long to appoint?
Well, why do leaders do that?
Why do they
'Cause
do
he's
that?
not the first one to do it.
No, I know.
Why do they wait so long? And yeah,
I don't
Well,
know.
especially because
So I
we've
think
got
that
two
could have had
credible
effect.
candidates running for the nomination. They were out doing the legwork. They were working at it. They were probably doing it for a year. Lisa was for well over a year, and Melissa had been working at it all winter at least. Why wait?
So I think that could have hurt.
And the president, from what I'm told, she told the membership of the board, the Conservative board, that we would have because she was told they would have a nomination. Didn't happen, so she resigned from being the president because we don't believe in that. We think you should have your nomination in advance if you have two credible candidates.
What's interesting is what I'd like to go through and find out are the candidates that were appointed by Polyev. I think they said there might be 90 candidates that he appointed over.
Well, they're blaming Jenny for it, but
Yeah,
he would have to approve it at some point.
It's like, yeah.
Yep.
So he's responsible.
Sure.
He appointed
so
Jenny.
how they did?
Well, yes, I'd be curious to know out of the 90 that were
won?
appointed,
How
how
many
many
won?
of them actually won, and did that have an impact?
Right.
Well, I know 5 that lost that I personally know. So.
Yeah. So there's
and,
5.
Well, and then there's Brian McDonald that's been out there for 9 months. His
a year.
opponent
And 10 years before
Almost a
that.
year.
his opponent was appointed and won handedly. So it just there you go. There's an example where he won by almost 15,000 votes. David Miles was appointed a week before he gets elected. It's sort of the anomaly.
Yeah.
You really should be out there for a year doing it.
And the
but
Liberals
yeah.
could have had they could have called a nomination long before Rep drop if they wanted to. They knew
Jenica
for
had
lots
announced
of time that
Yeah.
Jenica wasn't running,
I
but
think,
they didn't.
No, because I think
there were
they
other candidates.
I think they didn't really have a lot of other candidates that
Right.
prior
Until
to the Trump
until Trudeau stepped
Carney
down.
came
until
along.
Trudeau stepped down, and then all of a sudden they saw there was an opportunity, which is fine.
Yep.
But you are right. Out of those 90 of the Conservative candidates who were appointed. How did they all sort of do? I think it's a great thing to look into it. If there's anything that Poilievre should be tweaking to be sort of more grassroots, more for the people, more like soften it up, is having your nominations fair and square for people. Easing up on the the anti-media, anti-journalism. They play a role, and a very good role, and are needed. I think I'd be easing up on that. And you try to do that during the campaign, but smile more and show your personal side.
Well, and I mean, I know Poilievre from prior to being the leader when he was a member of parliament and a critic and in opposition. Like, he actually had progressive positions on policy, and he was inclusive and by and large, and that seemed to change. It seemed to change anyways when it came time to have leadership aspirations. So he definitely, a Conservative Party is pretty fractured across the country in terms of progressive versus conservative, and to get the numbers, you kind of have to be a right-wing conservative, it seems like. But anyways, often you'll see on election night, how many times have we seen leaders get defeated either as a party or as individually, but they then say what they really feel.
Right.
And it's like, if they could have just talked like that during the election or while they were elected, but it must be a psychological pressure.
Well, then
you get all the experts that tell you what you got to be.
Stay on this message. Stay on this. It's working. Here's the numbers that show it. Whether they're, sometimes they're, you not even know if they're right numbers. But
I know.
Your coach reminded. So anyway,
we have more to talk about when we come back.
We do. Yes. Let's go back. Let's come back in a few minutes after these public service announcements.
Well, hello there. Welcome back to the Carr Brothers Show. It's episode 142, and I'm Jack.
And I'm Jeff.
And I'm Jody. Welcome back to the Carr Brothers.
Yes.
Of course, we're seen on Facebook, on our YouTube channel, and on a podcast afterwards, and also on CHCO TV, broadcasted in every home in New Brunswick that has cable. So we're on Rogers, Shaw, and on Bell. And just check your local listings on your guide on the TV of what channel. There's a variety of different channels on each cable provider, and also on their website as well. So we're very pleased to have CHCO based out of St. Andrews, New Brunswick, and Charlotte County to be a part of our show. It's been great.
And under whatever medium you're watching or listening to us on, welcome.
Yes.
Welcome. You're welcome. You come back here tonight, and you come back anytime.
Anytime. You're welcome.
Anytime. And speaking of Charlotte County,
yes,
and speaking of the federal election, now, Charlotte County is riding is much larger now than Charlotte County, but John Williamson's riding. It's called St. John St. Croix, and the riding always had been quite large. Originally basically represented by, not originally, but since I've been involved since the 80s or whatever, was Greg Thompson. Different times it's flipped, I guess, with Karen Ludwig, who had been elected there, but John Williamson's held it. Except that little stint. But then this time there was a re-election with John Williams. Karen Ludwig came back and thought it would be kind of close. But really, John Williamson wins with 53.1% of the vote, 26,596 votes. And Karen Ludwig had 41.5% at 20,789. So it was a fair number.
Yeah.
It was a fair number. And she was kind of late coming in, too, wasn't it?
She came along after Carney was elected, I believe, as leader.
And I know
new parts to the riding.
There's new parts to the riding. Exactly. That was my next point. So, it's taken in all the way up to the border of Ormocto. So, the village of Gagetown as well. And Burton comes up to, where else does it come?
Worshagornish, Shanwell Road area.
Worshagornish, Shanwell Road.
Beaver Dam.
Does it include Tracy and
Appahaw?
Fring Junction as well? Yeah, Tracy, Fring Junction, Clarendon, all in there.
Grand Bay,
So
all
everything
those
really
areas.
south of the village of New Maryland and Ormocto, you just go south right on down into Charlotte County and over towards Harvey. I think Harvey's carved out the other way now, but it's a big swath.
Huge.
Down to 4 islands.
Huge.
Graham and Ann, Deer Island, Campobello, and Whitehead Island.
And now
all
into,
that travel
into St. John
West.
It's big riding.
It's a lot.
Huge.
Almost not fair to have to the people, but they never take in geography. Very rarely they take in geography unless it's something to do with language.
Definitely
or
not
culture.
fair to the people for accessibility.
No. It's just not fair. But
No,
we're not going to solve that one. But
no, but yeah. And I say this now, right? But large ridings.
yeah.
But John Williamson made, up around where we live, made a visit to Burton and made a visit to Gary, had a little coffee open house. That was good. And I don't know, he's been elected for quite a long time in the Charlotte County areas. It's more rural area, maybe spread out in rural, and that's certainly probably indicative of the rest of different parts of New Brunswick. It's traditionally kind of and that boundary change could have affected Brian McDonald's in Fredericton.
Absolutely.
I think you're right.
Would have had, maybe.
I don't know if Brian would have been able to make up the gap with Gary and Burton, because I think typically there's a couple thousand votes in each in Gary and Burton.
Yeah.
In that area, and they don't all vote. So I don't think Gary and Burton would have been enough to put Brian over the
But
top.
remember,
but it certainly didn't hurt John, because he won by
6,000 votes.
6,000 votes. So didn't hurt him any.
No. But anyway, it'll be interesting to go to the poll by poll.
It will.
Right.
Very interesting.
Anyways,
No, it will.
I want to just see how the polls go, how the towns and the villages go, which way they've gone, and where the vote count comes from.
Yep.
It's just be interesting to see who backed who and when. And
anyway, and then going forward, who's going to even the ones that didn't win but maybe came somewhat close, but who's going to stick with it? And keep running or keep at it. And it's look at Bruce Vanjoy, the candidate who did live in New Brunswick and from New Brunswick, I think moved when he was younger. He was campaigning for 2 years.
In Poilievre's riding?
In Poilievre,
Really?
yes. He campaigned for 2 years.
Wow. That's what it takes.
And that's what, especially when you're going up against the leader that's been there for 20.
6 months ago, he must have just thought, what am I doing here?
I think he kept saying he was going to win.
Really?
That's what it takes.
I saw some previous posts on Facebook and different places that they had, and he said, anyway.
Because you have to have that burning passion and desire. And
you really do.
And you also, maybe 6 months it didn't look that well, but things change so much, as we've seen. Trudeau steps down, Trump, the whole 51st state, and then he was able to get
generally there's a formula, and if you follow that formula in your constituency, then almost anybody can win. Look at us. No, but you just connect.
We did say almost anyone. Not everybody can, but there is that formula.
If you connect with your constituents, you meet people, you join organizations, you find out what's going on. And in his riding, Carleton, with Poilievre's not there. He's in every other riding, so even that probably gave him somewhat of an advantage. But
and that has quite a bit of a rural part in that riding, I've discovered. So that's
so. From what I'm hearing, and I don't think it's publicized anywhere, it might be, but the speculation is that the convoy affected Poilievre because it was in Ottawa.
Oh, in his riding, you mean?
Yeah. And the Trump effect, and then him being out of the riding so much. And when you start talking about making cuts,
civil service.
The civil service gets to wondering where is he going to make up the difference at?
Which house is going to lose their jobs?
Because if you're cutting taxes,
you're in Ottawa,
you're cutting all this stuff. Well, you got to make up the difference in the balance sheet.
He said he was going to cut civil service, and he criticized the civil service. So you're going to lose in the cities where the civil service is.
There's a certain percentage of people that live there that work for the government of Canada,
and perhaps maybe that's why Brian did as bad as he did,
and be less than positive about the civil service. You're kind of putting them all down. Bureaucracy, gatekeepers, and I'm sorry, but you did. That happened in Fredericton during the last provincial government under Higgs. You gave this impression, and when not everyone, but a lot of people don't like you. Likability is a big part of it, and their jobs are threatened that way. And nothing's going to change. Well, anyway, it's not. It's not them. It's the direction they're given by the leaders that are elected. Sorry.
Signals that they take from it.
But so it'll be interesting to watch who sticks with it, who's going to keep kind of campaigning. In a minority government,
it might not be that far down the road that they have to stick with it.
That's
great. I know. That's what you're going to tell them all, so that they stay motivated. Oh my gosh, I'm exhausted.
But perhaps though, this fall, they have to be on standby this fall.
That's what probably what Poilievre will say.
Exactly.
We can afford a leadership convention. We could be in an election at any time. You got to stick here, and in terms of by-election, the tradition is that if a party leader wants a seat, the person steps aside, and then the government basically in a timely manner calls the by-election. But again, this is not typical times, so who knows? Who knows what will
If
happen?
Kearney performs well and a by-election is called, those people might decide to stay with government.
Well, you know, people nowadays, it's potentially different in some ways. Like, people aren't shy to vote against something or to be anti, you know, or to say, look, you don't take us for granted. And the other thing is people aren't supporting political parties the same way they used to, and there's no guarantee.
No.
Which is good because people have to do their job.
Keep them on their toes.
And no vote should be taken for granted. You know, an individual can change their mind. Like Jack said, let's respect what people choose for whatever reason they have. I might not agree, but hey, that's your choice.
That's right.
So anyway, interesting times.
Yeah.
What else?
Well, I think we could look to Rob Moore, too. Steady, solid over in that riding. His riding changed some, too. Went farther into Riverview, which is typically a conservative area anyhow. But Rob Moore's been he's been a pretty good MP. He's active. He's vocal. He understands the files, very well educated. And he's at all of the events, like on the weekends. I just can't imagine
how he does it.
So people talk to us about how you guys did it. Well, we had provincial ridings that are just a fraction of the size of their federal ridings, and Rob Moore is very, very active, and it showed in the polls. I think the only time he probably lost was Elena Lockhart when Trudeau first won in 2015, that big wave. He stuck with it at the time.
They won all 10 ridings in the Brunswick at that point.
But he was one of those people, like you say, stuck with it, waited for the next election to come along. And he reoffered, and he's still there 2 elections later. So Rob puts in some pretty good numbers, but he also puts in the time for it. And I've never, from my constituency office, had to work with Rob's, but I can't imagine why the service wouldn't be great. It would be probably A1.
Yeah.
He's just that old school constituency candidate, MP, that understands the grassroots stuff.
Yeah, steady hand.
Have a lot of time for Rob.
Yeah, me too. And my riding once are used to cross over in there one of those times, and a good response from Rob. And
I feel kind of he's been working at it so long, and he deserved really for the Conservatives to go in power so Rob Moore could be in cabinet because he has a lot to offer. We'll see if he sticks around. He's not that old. Really, he's not much older than me. So
no,
maybe he's younger than me. I'm not sure.
He could be.
We're around the same age.
But
he has a lot to offer.
What else, Jack? What else are you thinking about?
What are you guys thinking about?
Now you want to throw this back on us, don't you?
The Liberal stalwarts, I mean, they held on without any surprise. Dominic LeBlanc just crushed Natalie Vautour, I think her name was. No shock there. Jeanette Petitpas-Taylor in Moncton soundly held on to her seat. She was previously a Minister of Health and Veterans Affairs, so she seems to be very well liked in the Moncton area. Moncton area is hard for Conservatives to win when it comes federally. Robert Gauguin won there for Harper at one time, and that was probably the only time I really remember having the seat.
In the 80s, Dennis Cochrane was elected.
But the Miramichi riding was a shootout. It was a shootout. It was up for grabs.
It was back and forth.
Our friend Jake Stewart, the incumbent, decided to not reoffer in this election, and Mike Dawson, the MLA for the Miramichi area in the legislature, gave it a go. Former MLA and Cabinet Minister Lisa Harris ran for the Liberals. It was another showdown. That's Lisa's second kick at that seat. And Mike pulled it off. I don't know what the final numbers are, but I'm thinking around 500 to 700 difference.
Something very, very close.
Very close. So Mike's going to Ottawa. Mike Dawson, wish him all the best.
So does that mean there would be a by-election?
There will have to be a provincial by-election.
Because he's already resigned.
Right.
Before we run out of time, let's end our thoughts on what we think. Should Susan call by-election right away? Should she wait 6 months and call it? What's the strategy? What's the strategy if it was our call?
I don't know what if I don't know.
Well, her numbers, her polling, her popularity is only going to go down.
Yeah, like
going forward.
The only way that the government would want to wait is if they didn't have a candidate, and I can't imagine the government not having a candidate. In fact, if we
people
do
come out quicker if they knew the seat was empty and you have a chance to go in government.
yeah, and I think too when you look at the statistics now, Jack can correct me if I'm wrong, but and it's a little maybe different now because governments switch and people's votes aren't guaranteed. But Jack Carr ran in a by-election in 2008. That was within the first 4 years, the first 2 years of a new government.
It's right here where we're sitting.
Yeah, the first 2 years in a new government, and only 2 other times
Up to that point.
did a member of the opposition get elected in a riding during a by-election the first 2 years of a new government, and Jack was the third ever. The other 2, Jack, were
Richard Hatfield
when he was, well, not premier, but when he ran in a by-election.
He ran in a by-election and
under Louis Robichaud.
and Eugene McGinley.
And Eugene McGinley out of Bathurst.
My opponent in 2006.
First time through.
Yeah, back in the 70s.
Up in Bathurst.
Wow.
And what I always said the difference was between those 2 ridings is that they were elected in ridings that were traditional of their party. So Eugene McGinley in Bathurst, it was a Liberal riding, and yes, he got elected in the first couple of years of a new government under the Conservatives, but still. And Richard Hatfield got elected in Carleton County, and it was a new Liberal government, but it's Carleton County, Progressive Conservative. In Jack's riding, New Maryland-Sunbury, and later your riding, it's not just one.
It's moved back and forth.
Moved back
over
and
time.
forth.
Rarely, but it has moved a few different directions.
Yeah. So the advantage should be with Susan Holt and the Liberals being in government. There's only been 3 times in 100 and some years where the government would have lost a by-election the first 2 years of a new government. So probably I'd hedge with that and call it fairly soon. Like, why wait?
Right.
Well, like Jeff said,
Agreed.
it's probably only going to get tougher for the governing Liberal. We'll have to get on that
we
another
didn't even
day,
get
but
into it about the cuts.
There's child
coming.
welfare. There's libraries being cut.
The good old
things like
days.
that.
Well,
So
now-
we'll get into that in another
Yeah,
episode.
now that we have the federal election behind us, next week we can start talking about maybe
Right.
analyzing
And get some guests.
all of
There's-
the little snippets and tidbits that are coming out now about different cuts. Now that they've been through the estimate
Didn't
process.
we tell them here are the questions you have to ask, and those
Right.
questions weren't asked until the auditor or the Child and Youth Advocate
Yeah.
brought some
Right.
news forward.
Thank
but
God.
Next week they will be back in the legislature for first week
Committees.
since committee's been over.
Okay.
And
We'll get
regular
some more
business.
information.
So
Good.
we'll maybe focus on that. We'll try to get ourselves a guest that wants to talk about some of those things.
And we have some other guests too that for
I
other
can't
things
wait.
too.
Great.
So,
We have some people lined
Yes.
up.
So
right.
we want to thank everybody under the sun, CHCO to Charlotte County, our director Terry Gallant, our producers out of St. Stephen,
Yes.
St. Andrews, St. Andrews, Patrick Watt.
And our viewers that look forward to watching us every week. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good night.